Welcome and welcome back to Triple S Reviews. Today we're point by point reviewing and breaking down episode 8 of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Spoilers ahead, let's begin. Point number 1. The beginning of this episode really highlights the childlike naivety and innocence of the adults of At-Atin, that they don't question at all if Jod is actually an emissary or not, and they take him activating his lightsaber as just him showing them he's a Jedi and can be trusted. It'd be like IRL, a cop making sure you know he's a cop and can be trusted by pulling out his pistol and firing off a round. Point number 2. No, the supervisor is not Takrenod. No, the supervisor is not a Mykian, aka the same race as Neil. And no, the supervisor is not Jar Jar Binks. It is, as many guessed, including myself, a droid. A droid that looks like if HAL 9000 let themselves go a bit. Also of note is that this room has the same at-planet coordinate pillars as at Akron. But at Akron didn't have a big old Chungus droid in the middle of its room. This could either mean at Akron's supervisor wasn't a droid, or if it was a droid, it was stripped for parts until there was nothing left. Point number 3.
I have been watching over you and your daughter with great interest.
We will watch your career with great interest.
Point number 4. The supervisor saying he received a message from the Republic about how all the Jedi are now traitors may sound like a contradiction to what's been established that no messages are allowed through the barrier. But what we've actually been told is that
communication outside the barrier is not permitted.
And then in this episode, we see Jod transmit a holo image of himself outside the barrier to call in the other pirates. So combining these two facts, we come to the conclusion that communications can pass through the barrier in both directions, but only via the supervisor tower, and it's up to the supervisor whether he responds or not. And it's also up to the supervisor whether he tells the population of At-Atin about any messages or not, since it appears the supervisor never informed them about the Jedi being labelled traitors. If he had, the kids' parents wouldn't have trusted him the moment he activated his lightsaber. I wonder what other messages the supervisor received but didn't pass on to the people of At-Atin. Could he have actually received a message saying the Republic was now the Empire, but kept it to himself for fear it might affect the great work? The way the supervisor says
The Republic
makes me think he might. Point number 5. If you're enjoying the video so far, give it a like to let me know, and if you're interested in seeing more, then make sure to subscribe. Point number 6. The absolute incompetence of these many security droids not being able to take down a single man with a lightsaber. I mean, I know they're only droids, not like clone troopers, but still, all they had to do was fire simultaneously, and there'd be no way for Jod to block every shot. Even after Jod stabs into the supervisor, the droids kept moving. So why didn't they just shoot into Jod's exposed back? Point number 7. Speaking of Jod stabbing the supervisor, whoever designed it should be fired in my opinion, for giving it such a design flaw that it ends up disabled when its eye and what's a few feet behind it are damaged. Like, was that where the droid's brain was? Why put it there instead of in the center, where it would be more protected? Just makes me think of the spaceship designs that have the bridge at the very front of the ship with a big glass window. Battlestar Galactica got it right by putting the CIC still towards the front, but deep inside where it's actually protected. Point number 8. So, Jod stabbing the supervisor for some reason disabled the security droids that were in the same room. Then we see power going out across the city for all buildings, vehicles, and other security droids, suggesting a connection between the supervisor going offline and the power going out. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think the supervisor being taken out is what made all the power in the rest of the city turn off. I think that was actually Jod, since the consoles in the supervisor room remain powered. And he says in his transmission to Gunter that he seized control of At-Atin systems. Still though, this doesn't explain why the droids in the supervisor room deactivated. My theories are that either the droids' systems were overloaded due to being so close to the supervisor when he was destroyed, or that they were being controlled directly by the supervisor and so went offline due to him being destroyed. Point number 9. I love Neil's finishing the bubble bath he was taking back when Wim interrupted in episode 1. Point number 10. God damn, the aim of these pirates is worse than stormtroopers. I mean, I know the hoverbikes are small, fast-moving targets, but it's not like they're zigzagging around. They're driving in a straight line, Just shoot ahead of them. Actually, no, don't do that. Don't shoot at the children or anybody else, please. Point number 11. I guess they went the way through the woods that Fern and KB would use to shortcut to school, and not the way Wim went, since they don't come across the massive hole left by the Onyx Cinder unearthing itself. Point number 12. The moment KB decided to lead them into the school, I knew for a certainty that Neil was going to get separated, so that he could then go to the roof and find the gun to use it against the pirates. Just a perfect setup and payoff of the literal Chekhov's gun. Point number 13. If the supervisor was suspicious of Jod, then why did he allow the security droids to start loading credits onto the Onyx Cinder? It's not as if Jod would have known if credits were being loaded onto the ship or not after heading off to meet the supervisor. Actually thinking about it, why is the Onyx Cinder back on the surface at all? The last time we saw it, it had descended on the platform down to the underground vaults. Why didn't the supervisor just keep it underground until he confirmed that Jod was actually an emissary, and then send it back to the surface when he was ready to leave? Thinking about it some more, what if there hadn't been a second ship that Jod wanted to get through the barrier? I mean, that's the entire reason he wanted to see the supervisor, to get the other ship and his crew through. But if they didn't exist, would the Onyx Cinder still have been loaded up with credits? And would Jod have just been simply allowed to leave, no questions asked? Or would it turn out he'd have to speak to the supervisor anyway to get the Onyx Cinder unclamped? Point number 14. Hey, 33 lives! I'm glad that him being decapitated wasn't the last we saw of him. That would have been just too depressing. Point number 15. Atin having a hyperspace route that leads directly to it so that the X-Wings can get there in 2 flaps might sound convenient, but when you take into account Atin is an official, though hidden, Republic planet, it makes sense they would have chosen a planet that's easily reachable by them and their emissaries time and distance-wise to turn into a mint, and then just make it hard to find and land on unless you know what you're looking for and have the right ship. Point number 16. So Jod wasn't a youngling survivor of Order 66, or a random Force sensitive with no connection to the Jedi. Jod was essentially Ezra Bridger, a Force sensitive street orphan found and trained by a Jedi. But unlike Ezra, Jod's master died not that long after taking him on as an apprentice, and he ended up back on his own again, turning to piracy to survive. Point number 17. Did anyone else think when Jod was force pulling the lightsaber, it was going to activate slip out of the kid's hands and impale him? That would have been a brutal way for him to go, and technically his death would have ended up being on the kid's hands. So in my opinion, it's a good thing that didn't happen. Don't want a repeat of the controversy of Anakin and Luke being such young killers. Point number 18. Oh, that is so awesome seeing a B-Wing use its composite beam for, I'm pretty sure, the first time in live action. Really cool. Point number 19. The look Jod gets on his face the last time we see him seems to hint to me that he's not given up yet, which I don't know how to feel about. As I said in my review of the last episode, I thought we were going to see Jod die, maybe by being buried under a mountain of credits. And despite this episode trying to make you feel sympathetic towards Jod by explaining his backstory, having him say he never wanted anyone to get hurt, and throwing away his gun instead of shooting Fern, Wim and their parents, I still feel like Jod should have gotten what was coming to him more than just him not getting the treasure he was after. But then again, he is Jod Silver, aka John Silver, and Long John Silver doesn't die at the end of Treasure Island, so what do you guys think? Were you satisfied with Jod's ending? Point number 20. Speaking of ending, I've seen a fair number of people say they weren't happy with how suddenly the episode ended, that we didn't get a wrap-up scene similar to, say, the end of Goonies, with all the kids and their parents watching Jod and the other pirates in handcuffs being taken away. I didn't mind the ending. I thought it wrapped up quite nicely while leaving some threads open that could be resolved in the future, though maybe not in a second season, because despite being a well-liked show, with nowhere near the level of moronic fandom menace slop made about it compared to The Acolyte, reading straight from an article on GameRant.com, according to Nielsen's December 2nd to 8th streaming data, Star Wars Skeleton Crew premiered with the lowest viewership of any Star Wars series in its first week. The 2-episode premiere scored less than 382 million minutes watched. This is roughly 20% lower than the ratings for Star Wars The Acolyte's premiere week, the previous record holder for the lowest viewership of any Star Wars series debut. Star Wars Skeleton Crew also became the first series in the franchise to fail to debut in Disney Plus's top 10 originals. The article then lists some theories as to why Skeleton Crew struggled. Fans place most of the blame squarely on The Acolyte, which has its supporters but was largely panned. Some bad faith actors were review bombing Star Wars The Acolyte, and unfairly criticising the series for foolish reasons such as Coyote Mundy's cameo, or having the audacity to feature several characters who weren't white males. males. However, others felt it didn't quite work out for legitimate reasons. Regardless of why, many didn't like Star Wars The Acolyte, which was reflected in the show's declining viewership over its run. Some fans believe viewers are still sour towards the franchise after The Acolyte and have opted to skip Star Wars Skeleton Crew. It could be argued that Star Wars Skeleton Crew did not entice audiences because it lacked familiar and popular characters from the franchise. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, and Andor benefited from having popular characters from past Star Wars projects, and The Mandalorian created a new fan favourite in Grogu who could reliably draw in viewers. While some fans want the Star Wars franchise to move away from nostalgia and the Skywalker saga, ratings suggest most viewers aren't willing to tune in unless they see some recognisable faces. That's reportedly why Lucasfilm is keen on bringing Daisy Ridley's Rey back for multiple Star Wars projects, and the article ends acknowledging that, of course, Star Wars Skeleton Crew's ratings for episodes 3 to 8 could improve thanks to good word of mouth. While there is reportedly a plan to bring back some Skeleton Crew characters in Dave Filoni's upcoming Star Wars movie, a second season for the show is likely off the table if viewership doesn't increase. Consequently, Disney and Lucasfilm may take this as proof that new characters and original stories don't work and that nostalgia is the way to move the Star Wars franchise forward. And that mention of Skeleton Crew characters returning for Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie, the crossover movie connecting The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, and I guess now Skeleton Crew, is what I meant by threads left open at the end of Skeleton Crew that could be resolved in the future. The most likely thread being the fate of Jod. Maybe he somehow escaped off at Atin, or maybe he was captured and locked up, but I could see him ending up aiding the heroes of all the other series in Dave Filoni's crossover movie with their efforts to defeat Thrawn, though only because he's offered cold hard credits in return for his help. He is still a pirate after all. But we'll just have to wait and see if the viewership of episodes 3 to 8 and the positive reception and popularity of the show convinces Disney to one day make a season 2. To round all this off, my most disliked part of the episode goes to the oddity of the Onyx Cinder being loaded up with credits then risen back to the surface despite the supervisor being suspicious of Jod. Just doesn't really make any sense to me. And my most liked part of the episode goes to Neil going from being in a bubble bath to him firing a freaking laser cannon. Little Dude can do it all. Thank you everyone for watching Triple S Reviews. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like to let me know, and if you want to see more then make sure to subscribe. I also have a variety channel where I post a variety of different videos. If any of them interest you, check them out. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.